Phelddagrif. What do it do? In my case, I've made Phelddagrif a group hug deck. I love group hug decks. If you don't, well, you're an enemy number one. I love the aspect of only truly helping others with no means to a win. Some group hug decks do have a win con, but this one does not. Keep that in mind. We want Phelddagrif to bestow its blessings upon everybody. Life gain, card draw, and 1/1 hippos. We need to ramp like crazy and grant everyone our little bundles of hippo joy. And in this case, little hippo physical tokens. And yes, I stole this idea from someone at my local game store. But first, let's start with questing Phelddagrif. Questing Phelddagrif is basically a hidden commander of the deck. He does very similar things to the normal Phelddagrif, giving out hippos, gaining life, and having people draw cards. It's really, really great. So we need to get him out and have as much mana as possible to do each of those things as much as we can. Let's ramp ourselves and get as much land out as we can so we can use those abilities as much as we can. Font of Fertility, Rampant Growth, Sakura Tribe Elder, they're all just basic land searchers, pretty straightforward. Fertilid, Kodama's Reach. Fertilid, you can search for a couple lands by removing counters from it and paying for it. And Kodama's Reach searches for 2 basics. You put 1 on the battlefield tapped and 1 into your hand. Growth Spiral and Elvish Rejuvenator. Growth Spiral, you draw a card and you put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Elvish Rejuvenator looks at the top 5 cards of your library and you can put a land from among them onto the battlefield, which is really great because it could be a, it could be a dual land or something. Coveted Jewel. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, and it taps for 3 mana of any one color, which is awesome. But whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attacks you and they're not blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of Coveted Jewel, and you untap it. So everybody can kind of send this back and forth between each other and draw cards and all sorts of stuff, and it's just kind of a fun little card. Then we have Tempt with Discovery. This has Tempting Offer, so you search for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield, and then each opponent can do the same, but everyone that they search for, you also get to search for. So if all 3 of your opponents search for a land, you get to search for 4 lands, which is always great, and they know that you are not trying to win, you're just trying to help them, so more people are more likely to agree to search for lands. Zimone Quandrix Prodigy. Pay 1 and tap her to put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Or you can pay 4 and tap to draw a card. But if you control 8 or more lands, draw 2 cards instead. So, kind of helping you out a little bit with ramp. Next we have Eudora Grave Gardener. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land, so all your creatures that enter the battlefield and then do nothing else, once they die, they'll just come back as lands to help you out even further. Lastly, in this section, we have Skyward Eye Prophets. This art is super weird. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but it's a 3/3 with Vigilance, which I guess doesn't really matter. And you tap it to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. So you kind of get a nice little, deck sorting, and you can get things out as fast as possible. Now let's move on to Upkeep Shenanigans. Kami of the Crescent Moon. This is the nice spirit with the nice bum crack. At the beginning of each player's draw step, the player draws an additional card. So, yeah, help everybody out and have everybody draw as much as possible here in this section. Dictative Crew Fix. It has flash, and at the beginning of each player's draw step, the player draws an additional card. It's basically the same thing. Rise of Flourishing. At the beginning of each player's draw step, the player draws an additional card. Each player may pay an additional land on each of their turns as well. Magus of the Vineyard. At the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, add 2 green to that player's mana pool. So just give them an extra mana. Even if they're not using green, they can use it in their colorless mana costs. And they can just cast stuff. And if you get this turn 1, people already have extra mana to go around. Next we have Leyline, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So they can put a counter on anything, or they'll most likely put it on their creatures, but it's each player's upkeep, so you can put a counter on something else if you'd like. Girapur or Orrery. Each player may play an additional land on their turns, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if they have no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. So you just kind of help everybody out. Extra lands and extra card draw if they're running low. Next section, we have extra mana. If the extra card draw wasn't enough, here's some extra mana. Victory Chimes. This one's fun. I loved Battle Bond. But you untap Victory Chimes during each other player's untap step. So you tap it, a player of your choice adds a colorless mana. So each turn you just give everybody a colorless mana for free, just, for fun. Then we have Tangle Root. Whenever a player plays a creature spell, that player adds green to his or her mana pool. So, cast a creature, get mana. Cast another creature, get mana. Cast another creature, get mana. So that's really good for elf decks. Heartbeat of Spring and Dictate of Karametra. Both say whenever a player taps a land for mana, they add an extra mana of that type that land produced. Double mana for, kind of double mana for everybody. Now let's have everybody put stuff into play just for free. First we have Tempting Worm. Whenever Tempting Worm comes into play, each opponent may put any number of artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and or lands from their hand into play. Tempting Worm is a stupid card, but it's so fun in these type of decks. Charmed Griffin. Flying. Whenever Charmed Griffin comes into play, each of the player may put an artifact or enchantment from their hand into play. Hunted Wumpus. When it enters the battlefield, each player may put a creature card from their hand onto the battlefield. Braids, Conjurer Adept. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put an artifact, creature, or land from their hand on the battlefield, so that happens every turn. Gate to the Ether. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player reveals the top card of their library. If it's an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land, that player may put it into play. Iwamari of the Open Fist. That enters the battlefield, each opponent may put a legendary creature card from their hand onto the battlefield. Weird Harvest. So you pay X, each player may search his or her library for up to X creature cards, reveal them, put them into their hand. Then we have Zender Split's Judgment. For each player, choose friend or foe, and in this case we'll probably just choose friend for everybody. Each friend creates a token that's a copy of a creature they control. Oh man, that section is awesome. Just get crazy with it. Let's draw some more. Yes, we could draw some more. Soaring Show Off and Indentured Djinn. When the Soaring Show Off enters the battlefield, each player draws a card. When Indentured Djinn comes into play, each other player may draw up to 3 cards. So it won't help you, but it'll help everybody else, which I guess is the point. But 3 cards when he comes into play. That's great. Howling Golem and Ruined Servitor. Whenever Howling Golem attacks or blocks, each player draws a card, and whenever Ruined Servitor dies, each player draws a card. Eager Construct. When Eager Construct enters the battlefield, each player may scry 1. Quain, Itinerant Meddler. Tap him, and each player may draw a card, and then each player who drew a card gains a life. Horn of Plenty. Whenever a player plays a spell, he or she may pay 1. If they do, to draw a card at the beginning or at the end of the turn. Fecundity, I think is what it's called. Whenever a creature dies, that creature's controller may draw a card. Jace Beleren. Jace is kind of scary, but we're not going to use him for scary things. So basically only look at the top +2 of the card. Each player draws a card, and just do that a bunch, and everybody will love you. Temple Bell. Tap it, each player draws a card. Vision Skeins and Truce. Each player draws 2 cards, and then Truce, each player may draw up to 2 cards. For each card less than 2, that player gains 2 life. So you basically draw a card, gain 2, or just draw 2. Flux. This one kind of has some weird wording, but basically each player can discard any number of cards in their hand and then draw that many cards. And then you also draw an additional card, and you go first. Words of Wisdom. You draw 2 cards, and each other player draws a card. Keeping that ball rolling. And then Folio of Fancies. Players have no maximum hand size, which helps everybody all the time. Pay XX and tap it. Each player draws X cards. And then the bottom one you probably don't even need to worry about. So if you don't think this is helping anybody very quick, well, I don't know where you've been, because this is amazing. Next section, more lands. Yes, we want everybody to have more lands to do things. So we've got Veteran Explorer. When he dies, each player may search their library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield. Collective Voyage. Join forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana, and then each player may search his or her library for up to X basic lands, where X is the total amount of paid this way. So if I pay 2, and then everybody else pays 2, that's 8. And then everybody searches for 8 land cards, or basic land cards, that is. Old Growth Dryads. This one's great. Turn 1. When Old Growth Dryads enters the battlefield, each opponent may search their library for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. So, if I go first, everybody's already got a land before they've even had a turn. It's awesome. New Frontiers. Exit a green. Each player may search his or her library for X basic land cards and put them into play. So kind of similar to that, to the couple of cards ago. But yeah, everybody just does tons of basic lands. If we got lots of mana ourselves, we will just get tons of mana out. Jungle Wayfinder. When Jungle Wayfinder enters the battlefield, each player may search for a basic land, put it in their hand. Root Weaver Druid enters the battlefield. Each opponent may search for 3 basic land cards. Then they put one of those cards on the battlefield tapped under your control, and the rest on the battlefield tapped under their control. So it's kind of weird. You basically steal some of their one of their lands, but they can get 2 extras, and you're not trying to hurt them. So it's kind of a nice way to do it, so that they're not just fighting you or nobody does it, you know. Peer's Whim. This is another friend or foe. You know, choose friend for everybody. Each friend searches their library for a land card, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and it's any land card. So everybody can get their nice triomes and all that crap. Now let's help Phelddagrif. Let's help ourselves for once. Opt and Inga Runei's. Let's just scry some and then draw some cards just to help. These are just kind of basic. You can swap those for basically whatever you want. Mist Meadow Witch and Illusionist Stratagem. Exile something and then return to the battlefield under your control. So all those creatures that enter the battlefield, and players can put X things onto the battlefield. These help because you can just do it over and over again, with Mist Meadow Witch especially. Aether Mage's Touch. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put a creature from among them onto the battlefield. And all our creatures help everybody. And at the beginning of your end step, return it to your hand so that you can cast it again for later. So you can do it multiple times for I don't know, to extra draw cards or put lands out and all that stuff. Unexpected Results. So you shuffle your library and then reveal the top card. If it's a non-land, you can cast it without paying its mana cost, and that's probably going to help everybody. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield and return this to your hand. So great way to ramp yourself and or put something out into play that helps everybody. Last, we have Saheeli's Artistry. So you basically make a copy of an artifact or a creature, and so you can just, like, again, make extra versions of things that help draw cards or whatever it is, like Tempting Worm, put extra stuff out on the battlefield. Now we've got some extra garbage. This is just whatever, but I think it's fun. We have Upwelling. So mana pools don't empty at the end of phases or turns, so everybody just keeps their mana all the time. Then we have Arcane Melee. Instant sorcery spells cost 2 less to cast. Like, who is this card for, you know, other than a group hug deck? Because everybody's stuff costs 2 less to cast, helping everybody out. And then the last 2 are kind of weird. So we got Diviner Spirit. So whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you and that player draw that many cards. So I'm dealing damage. I'm not trying to kill anybody, but if you just let this through, it's only 2 damage, and you draw 2 cards, and I'll draw 2 cards, and I just help everybody out that way. And last but not least, we have the weirdest guy in the deck, Lumbering Satyr. All creatures gain Forest Walk. Now I know that's probably not a good thing for a lot of people, but I just think it's a funny card, and I don't think I'd put it in any other deck. So take that. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your support. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and if you like what you see, hit that bell button and make sure you join me every Thursday for a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Thursday.